Thank you guys for being here for the kickoff of our Science Matters at CPL series. Today we're going to be learning from Jeny Davis with the Desert Botanical Garden. She's going to be talking about citizen science, how the community can get involved in collecting data, and why it is so important. And we will also be hearing from Daniella with the Environmental Education Center here in Chandler on the City Nature Challenge that begins at the very end of April. And we'll be talking about, how we can all get involved in the City Nature Challenge, and she'll be talking about what that is. So I do invite you to sign up and register for the next 3 Science Matters programs. We have one on Arizona's modern wildfire situation on May 26th. On June 16th, we have another one called Responding to a 21st Century Pandemic with 21st Century Science. And then on July 14th, the Race to Mars and Solar System Exploration. So we've got some really great programs coming up. And part of what the Science Matters at CPL series is about is, it's about connecting members of the community with scientists and researchers and other people in the community that have an expertise in something scientific that we all care about. So I will go ahead and let Jeny take it from here. She discusses citizen science.
Thank you very much, Aubrey. I'm going to share my screen. Let me know when you all can see that. Good to go? Perfect. Well, hello, everyone. I am the EcoFlora coordinator at the Desert Botanical Garden for the Metro Phoenix EcoFlora project. Thanks for joining us this evening, and thanks for being interested in citizen science. So we'll dive right in. Let's start by talking about what citizen science is. So this is public participation in scientific efforts or research. And this can include field work or processing data or observations, or even defining problems and contributing to publications. So what's in a name? You may have heard citizen science referred to as a number of different things, such as public participation in science, participatory action research, or community-based science. So citizen science is currently the most commonly used term within the community for scientific and educational community. So for the project I coordinate, we've chosen to use community science because it reflects our project best, and we feel it uses the most inclusive language. But for these, all terms refer to crowdsourcing scientific efforts. And there are tons of projects to get involved in, and it's really easy to get enthusiastic about multiple and joining them. There's literally a project for every month of the year. So a few organizations that are helpful and sort of connect projects around the globe are Citizen Science Association, SciStarter, which is a great place to search for projects in your area and join, and really around the country, and citizenscience.gov, which is collecting data for federal agencies. So project examples include Nature's Notebook, which is looking at phenology, Zombie Watch, which looks for parasites that make bees fly at night instead of during the day. Globe at Night monitors air pollution, and locally we have Desert Defenders, which looks at invasive species. And then there's Arizona Water Watch and Great Milkweed Growout, just to name a few. So some of the apps and tools that we use, apps include Inaturalist, eBird, Field, and Collector, and these all have different uses for specific purposes and data. So the tools also vary widely depending on the project that you're into. You might need a telescope to monitor the night sky, or a computer and some sensors for monitoring air pollution. And these can be provided by the project, or you might need to supply them yourself. So it's kind of a more recent movement that science has become an occupation and kind of requires credentials. For a very long time, science was mainly done by those who had the time and or money to investigate things that they were curious about. But science was still done by people who didn't really have a background or education in it, and often it was at the intersection of 2 different worlds. An example of this is the father of microbiology. He was a cloth merchant who created lenses so that he could better see the quality of fabric. So eventually he made the most powerful microscopes of the time, the lenses he created. And he was simultaneously curious about pond water, and he started looking at the microorganisms living in it. Another example that I really like is in Aldo Leopold's book, A Sand County Almanac. He talks about a woman who basically became the country expert on a specific bird just because she took the time to band them and study them in her own backyard. So citizen science is nothing new. Even Darwin crowdsourced data through letters, and people shared their observations with him that way. But for a time, there was a pushback from scientific elites, and it's taken quite a bit of convincing to show that citizen science is legitimate. Thankfully, today, citizen science is a robust field with a wealth of information that contributes to public foundations to federal agencies. So how is citizen science important and valued? So personally, one of the most amazing things about citizen science is the people power and the opportunity to discover. So when I first started working in science, I was kind of shocked at the amount of things we don't know. You kind of have this mentality like, oh, there's got to be some scientist working on that somewhere, right? But really, the world is just so big and intricate, and we don't know a lot. So the more people involved in science, the better. The more people looking at all kinds of things and studying and contributing leads to amazing work. Citizen science can change society and science itself. It can shape research, policies, and accessibility. So who uses the data and information, and can we trust it? Scientists, organizations, governments, and more use data and information collected by citizen scientists. On the screen here, you'll see two examples. On the right is a list of publications using Inaturalist observations. And in the center is a tweet, actually from a scientist, about a high correlation of data from Inaturalist users again. So a real world example of citizen science impacting policy comes from North Carolina. There was a community that began collecting garbage on the local beaches, and they started to take it home and categorize it and photograph it. And the amount of cigarette butts they found led to the town council passing smoking ordinances on the beach. And local businesses also took note of the plastics and started replacing their single-use plastics with reusables. And yes, we can trust this data. Reviews, photo evidence, training, testing, replication, and redundancy all make this data and information legitimate. So what does citizen science look like? When many people hear the term citizen science, they're not even really sure what that means. And the word science has kind of been coupled in our minds with images of beakers and Bunsen burners or laboratories and DNA strands, right? So people don't really think they can do those kinds of things without credentials or experience. And we don't immediately think of all the possibilities for scientific research. When in reality, there are so many different fields like life sciences, geology, chemistry. Citizen science can look like creating a native seed library or analyzing data from your computer at home. For me, it often looks like this in the top center, my camera buried in flowers and plants. And as we've already talked about, there are so many different projects to be involved in. So you can monitor monarch butterflies or analyze animal heartbeat data. It really is endless. So who can be a citizen scientist? If you haven't figured this out already, it's you. You can contribute and be a citizen scientist. You can acquire skills and learn new things or use existing skills, and you're in tune with your own environment, right? You know your house or your neighborhood or your community. If something changes or is off, you're going to be the one to notice, and that makes you an expert in your own area. So with curiosity and enthusiasm, the world is yours to study. So where can citizen science be done? Anywhere, online, at home, in schools, in your community. And with that note, I'll move on to the project that I coordinate. So the community science project I coordinate is the Metro Phoenix EcoFlora. Ecoфlora is a project that leverages citizen science to collect data on urban biodiversity, specifically plant life. At the same time, we're looking to enhance community relationships with nature. Ecoflora is an initiative of the New York Botanical Garden. They received a national leadership grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services to scale up this project. So each of the gardens you see here has their own ecoflora, including us here at Desert Botanical Garden. So the Metro Phoenix EcoFlora is our local chapter of this larger EcoFlora project. So we also fall under the umbrella of the Central Arizona Conservation Alliance, also known as CASCA, and our goals are well aligned with and support theirs. This project really centers around three concepts. We want to understand more about the effects of urbanization, right? How is it affecting plant life or wildlife? Even more so in the urban core, not just exurban and suburban areas. We want to make biodiversity data available to everyone. We use a platform that is free and open to the public so that anyone with a smartphone or access to a computer can also participate and use the collected data. So we want to increase understanding and appreciation of plant life. Plants can be sort of like inanimate objects for a lot of people, like a trash can or a street light. People don't necessarily notice until they use them. So we want EcoFlora to be a way to increase the recognition and understanding of plants and ecosystems. So why urban biodiversity and plant life? Well, nearly 70% of the world's population is predicted to live in urban areas in the not so distant future. Right now, it's about half. So multiple studies have shown the disconnect that's growing between people and nature. Many people can name celebrities, but they can't name or identify plants and animals in their own neighborhood. So as we become increasingly urban, these ecosystems are often understudied, especially when it comes to plant life. Floras are basically inventories of plants in a particular region or habitat. And to the best of knowledge, the last year a flora was completed for Metro Phoenix was 1999. So think about that for a second. The flora was completed just over 20 years ago. Now, think about the region and the changes that have happened here since then and how that could have changed plant life and biodiversity. So, we're experiencing rapid urbanization here in the Valley. We're one of the fastest growing cities in the United States. And we have floras or are working on floras for most of the parks in the area, such as the White Tanks or the McDowells. But we don't really know what's going on in urban areas, right? What species are living here? Are there potentially invasive species? Have we lost biodiversity? And as urban areas continue to increase, we need to understand how this impacts biodiversity so we can guide conservation. So, how does this work? Project members look for plants, animals, insects, any organism in Metro Phoenix, and document them with a web based platform and app called Inaturalist. Inaturalist is like a digital field guide and notebook that allows you to record observations. And I'm sure a few of you out there might be familiar with Inaturalist, it's pretty popular. The photos you upload are coupled with location, date, and species data to create an observation. It's a really cool technology that uses image recognition and GIS information to help you identify what you've observed. So there's also a really cool community aspect to iNaturalist. Other users from around the globe can weigh in and help confirm your identifications and provide more information. So this is oftentimes the way a scientist will see the first observations of a species in a given area and time. An example of this is a community scientist in the New York EcoFlora. They discovered a rare ash tree right in the middle of the city that they hadn't seen for a really long time and they weren't sure it still existed. And sure enough, one of their project members stumbled across it and documented it on iNaturalist. So research grade observations go into GBIF, which is the Global Biodiversity Information Database. So like we mentioned earlier, this data really does contribute to global efforts. Observations you make through iNaturalist really can be used by scientists around the globe. We also use SciNet, which is a digital online portal for information about plant species records. We use this to see what's been historically recorded in the area and compare it to what people are finding through iNaturalist. This will give us a glimpse into the overall state of biodiversity over time. So we have 3 different species lists, and the one that we're really excited about is a non-recorded list. So that is the species that have been recorded in SciNet, but not on iNaturalist. Excuse me, I have that backwards. So it's the species that have been seen on iNat but haven't been recorded in SciNet. So what that means is there are species that we're seeing through iNaturalist that we don't have records for. So these could be newly introduced plants that we don't really know much about, or they just haven't been documented. So we're really excited for this list to see what we don't have records for. So here you can see our boundary or study area for the Metro Phoenix EcoFlora on iNaturalist. It's based on Casca's study area loosely, with the parks as sort of outlying points. And on the right, lower right here, you'll see the top 15 observations of the project, which this is fluid and changing over time, especially as we add new observations constantly. So I want to note that we're focused on plant life, but accept observations of all species because we want to know about that overall state of urban biodiversity and the ecological interactions. As a side note, we don't encourage observations of houseplants or domesticated animals like your dog sitting in your living room. These are some really cool observations we've seen with the project so far. We've got an iron cross blister beetle, which rightly earned its name because it secretes a chemical that can burn you. We've got a roseate spoonbill here in the lower left, which looks like something very tropical. I was so surprised to find out those are here in Metro Phoenix. We've seen a sleeping bobcat in someone's backyard, badgers, and then we've also had some plant introductions. We've got corn spurry, which we haven't seen pop up again this year, and also Lassio pogon, which is in the top right. And these are newly introduced species, as we were talking about with the target species lists earlier. So what does it look like on the back end or behind the scenes, if you will? What does my job look like and what do I do with the data collected? So there is a lot that goes into coordinating citizen science projects. The majority of my time is spent on science communication. I create Ecoquests, which we'll talk about on the next slide, journal posts, guides, newsletters, and manage social media. And I also plan events and work with other organizations and scientists on collaborations. The rest of my time is spent analyzing the data collected and interpreting it. So this includes the species lists, again, that we mentioned, as well as looking at the results of the Ecoquests. If there's a species of plant that we need to collect and get a record of, I can do that also. And as we've mentioned, the data and information collected through this project will help us understand more about the biodiversity here, but it can also provide insight into things like the impacts of drought. For our last Ecoquest, we were looking for wildflowers and found there weren't many to be seen. And I'm sure a lot of you noticed that this year. So we can take the observations from this year and compare it to last year, along with drought conditions and temperatures, and maybe see what might be going on there. So we really do want this to be a collaborative community effort. We don't want to just extract data from project members. We want to share with them, provide educational resources, opportunities to learn new skills, participate in events, and get to know one another and make connections. So I also spend a lot of time trying to cultivate that. Ecoquests, in addition to the overall project, are monthly challenges that task the community with specific missions. These are kind of like hide and go seek games for urban biodiversity, looking for certain plants or ecological interactions. And this is how we really hone in on specific data, outreach and educate, and collaborate with other organizations. For example, the photo you see on this slide is an Ecoquest looking for desert willow. You can see that on the left here. And this helped us map where the species is growing, provided an opportunity to teach about a great native plant that works really well in urban areas, and it was in collaboration with the Arizona Native Plant Society. So another example is our wildfire Ecoquest. We wanted to increase the awareness that the Sonoran Desert is not fire adapted, but also provide a resource for restoration, especially for home landscapes that have experienced fire. So we created a guide in Inaturalist to accompany this Ecoquest that listed plants that can tolerate fire or resprout afterwards and can help the land to recover afterwards. We also have a journal and newsletter that helps keep everyone up to date with Ecoquest results, project happenings, and discoveries. Social media is a great venue for interaction with each other and broadening the scope of education and raising awareness. So something I'd like to note is that even if people aren't actively participating in this project, they can still learn and benefit from it through these other venues. Our most popular Ecoquest, aside from the very first one that we had, which was basically a free-for-all looking for anything and everything, in October we had Ocotillober. We always try to make fun names for the Ecoquests every month. And this one we were looking for ocotillos in urban areas, and we had 624 observations. So we brought the total number of ocotillo observations in Metro Phoenix up to 1,056. And I really like using this Ecoquest as an example of what we can see with the data. So the results from the Ecoquest allowed us to look at possible pollinator corridors and nectar resources for hummingbirds throughout the valley. The green dots that you see are all ocotillo observations, and you can see how these possible corridors in red connect to open spaces. So this supports the importance of these plants and these areas. So these are our current stats, which this is actually from last week, but this is from the start of the project in February of 2020. So as of, like I said, last week, we have 243 project members, 159 active observers, and about 1,000 identifiers. So we've had just over 13,000, which now we're almost up to 14,000 observations by project members. And about half of those are research grade, which I mentioned goes into that global biodiversity database. About 1,500 species, half of which are plants. And if we were to open up this little color wheel here, we would see that we've observed 758 different plant species so far. The second largest category is insects, and then followed by birds. So we've also had about 23,000 identifications, which you might ask how that's possible if we've only had 13,000 observations. The answer to this is that observations can have multiple people add identifications, which makes a stronger ID. So in other words, you can have 3 people add an ID to one observation. So despite the pandemic, about 2 months into getting this project started last year, we shifted everything to virtual. This includes Ecoquests, workshops, and events. The workshops consist of an introduction to the project, kind of like what I'm doing now, which teaches people how to join and use iNaturalist as part of a tech workshop also. So we created Eco Questions, which are short virtual presentations themed around the Ecoquest of the month and are presented by scientists, community members, and experts, followed by a question and answer session. So this month, actually tomorrow at 6 p.m., we'll be hearing from New World succulent cactus scientist, Dr. Tanya Hernandez, in coordination with our April Ecoquest Looking for Cactus. So we also host botany socials and block parties where everyone gets together to play botany themed games, talk about plants and the project. We do this over Zoom. And we refer to our project members as neighborhood naturalists. And you can see that little badge on this slide here in the top left. So we've just received the green light for in-person trainings and events. And we have a few iNaturalist trainings coming up. And I will put those in the chat at the end of the presentation. So we also now have a merit system for project members to earn rewards for observations. And you can see our t-shirts and our stickers and buttons here in this slide as well. Collaboration and working with other organizations is a major part of this project, which again, thank you to Chandler Public Library and Chandler EEC for having me here today. We've collaborated with multiple organizations outside of the project itself. Just to name a few, the McDowell Sonoran Conservancy Kids. We've created educational videos and a newsletter together to get kids excited about urban biodiversity and the nature in their own neighborhoods. We've provided foundational materials and video support for Maricopa County Parks EcoBlitz, which is like an EcoFlora for Maricopa County Parks. We've worked with Vision Gallery in Chandler on a kids class, and we're also featured in their gallery space in coordination with a nature-based art exhibit. And this year, we're also in the virtual Arizona Native Plant Fest, which will run through October. I really encourage you to go check that out. Again, I'll put that in the chat at the end of the presentation. There's a ton of great organizations and lots of information in that festival. So looking at what we've got going on for this year, we're continuing Ecoquest, Eco Questions and events, and like I said, in-person trainings, which we're really excited about. Those will be limited, 10 people or less, following guidelines. And we're co-organizing the City Nature Challenge, which Daniella is going to speak more about in a minute. And Ecoflora will be presenting at the virtual Citizen Science Association conference, as well as the American Public Gardens Association conference. And we've recently begun working with a graduate student at New York Botanical Garden to create a Symbiota portal for Ecofloras across the country. So this will be basically like a sign-up page for all of our Ecofloras across North America. So we're really excited for building community this year, especially, like I said, when we can gather in person, and we hope to host more events like bird walks, moth lighting, bike rides, urban hikes, and more. So I'll leave you with a quote from CASCA's Regional Open Space Strategy that really resonates with the EcoFlora project. The wildest and remotest place on Earth, the most imperiled species on Earth, will be protected only if people care about the nature where they live. So science isn't just for people in white coats wearing goggles in a lab somewhere. We all have an opportunity to be a scientist and see the data and results that come from it. We're all working together, learning and contributing to our well-being while we bolster observations and data. The Metro Phoenix EcoFlora is just one example of how a citizen or community science project operates, and there are so many others, like we've said, that you can contribute to and be involved in. Citizen scientists are so important and valued. We simply couldn't do this kind of science without you. So that's it. Thank you for having me present today. Again, my name is Jenny. If you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email at ecofloraphx@dbg.org. I'll place a link to our website and newsletter in the chat. You can follow us on social, EcoFloraPHX. Thanks again for having me, and happy Citizen Science Month.
Thank you, Jenny. That was such great information. Daniella, let's see if you could share your screen.
And I'm here to talk to you guys about the City Nature Challenge, which is the first time that
Chandler and the Greater Phoenix area is participating. Today I'll be talking about just how the event got started, the goals of the event, how to participate, and what that might look like when you're out and about, where exactly to participate, and just some safety tips, and we'll end with some information about how the results and all that will get announced. So this year we have partnered or we're collaborating with the EcoFlora project, which is how I met Jenny, and the Educating Children Outdoors group, which serves to educate children in a homeschool fashion, but they also do all sorts of different events that are environmentally education themed. And then for us, for Chandler, we're participating on behalf of the Community Services Department, which includes the Chandler Public Library as well. So the event was started in 2016, and it was a friendly competition between San Francisco and Los Angeles. And they decided to create this competition using an app called Inaturalist, which Jenny also mentioned briefly in her presentation. They basically invited people to go out during a specific week in April and encourage them to take photos and upload those photos to create observations in the Inaturalist app and see who could get the most people to participate in their event that year. As you can see, throughout the years, it has grown exponentially. It started between the two cities, but now it's a global event where we have over 200 cities. I think this year over 300 cities are participating. And this isn't just in the United States. This is worldwide, all over the world, in South America, Asia. So it's a really cool event. And the event, the goals of the event are they kind of speak to a little bit about what Jenny spoke about in her presentation, in that we really can't protect the environment if we don't know what's there. So this event is really unique because it uses this iNaturalist app to connect people to nature, whether it's in their backyard, in parks, or wild areas. And it helps you connect and build community in maybe ways that you didn't think were possible. We also want to just encourage people to get outside. This year, the event is going to be on April 30th through May 3rd. And so I'll talk about that a little bit more. But the idea of this event is, again, just to collect information that is eventually going to be useful for scientists. And maybe you'll learn something along the way. So how can you actually participate in the City Nature Challenge? We've actually broken this down into a few steps. So the first step would be to download the iNaturalist app on your phone or go online and create an account. On your phone is pretty handy because you can use that when you're outside, depending on, you know, if you see something cool within the moment, or you can always snap a photo and upload it later. If you're new to iNaturalist and you have no idea how to use it, these are actually, the right photo is a screenshot of what it looks like on your phone when you're going to upload something. But we do have 2 upcoming trainings, which I think Jeny actually shared in the chat. One is on April 20th at Tempe Town Lake, and the other one's on Saturday, April 24th at the Gilbert Riparian Preserve. But if you'd like to learn more about how to and training, we can add that link that I have listed here on this slide to the chat as well. And it'll actually have several other events that we have coming up that'll give you a little bit more information about how to use the application. So step 2, we want you to, once you download the app, we want you to go to iNaturalist and search for the Greater Phoenix Area Project. And so right here I have 2 screenshots of what it'll look like on the computer and what it might look like on your phone. And then the 2 things you want to do, or I'm sorry, the one thing you want to do is hit join. And this way it will give you updates all about the project if you join before the actual observation week. But you can also wait to join once you get closer to the date of the event. All of the observations will be counted towards a total. So when we say observations, we're just talking about going outside, uploading photos from anywhere. It could be in your backyard, a park, a green area, your neighborhood. So you can get really creative. And the 3rd step, which I kind of just talked about, is going outside during this specific week, April 30th through May 3rd. And I briefly talked about if you don't have a cell phone, that's okay. You don't actually need a cell phone. You can take photos the old-fashioned way on a camera, and then you can upload them to inaturalist.org on your computer, your laptop, or device. This is actually a screenshot of my account, and it just gives you an idea of what it will look like once you do actually upload something to the application. And this slide is just to give you a little bit of inspiration of different ways you might observe or make the event more fun for yourself. You can go birding, and then again, your high quality photos can get uploaded into the website. You can also, if you have kids, the hula hoop observation is really popular because you have them focus on just one specific area. And then you can move it around if you're in your backyard, but it's really cool to see kids interact and talk about what they see and how much bugs or just leaves, animals are in this particular area that they're looking at. The really fun ones, if you don't want to go out during the day, is to do a night observation. And you can get pretty creative here too. You can simply watch your porch light at night and see if you get any geckos or moths that come visit you and try to snap a photo of them. If you want to put up a white sheet and then put a light over it, that also will attract a lot of insects. So there's lots of different ways you can participate during that week and upload your photos to the iNaturalist app. But these are just some ideas that people might not think of, and just to make everybody aware that it's not hard science. It's just going out and making observations for yourself of something that you think looks cool or interesting. So where to participate? This is actually a screenshot of the area where if you take a photo during that week, April 30th through May 3rd, you will be counted as long as you're within this boundary. So we've made the boundary pretty large. So you don't just have to be in Chandler. You can really travel quite across most of Maricopa County. So there's a pretty good chance if you're able to upload anything, it'll get counted that week. And then I do wanted to include some safety tips because although it is exciting and fun when you're outside and you're observing and looking at all these sorts of things, it's also important to be safe. Especially here in Arizona, you know, the weather is starting to warm back up. So we want to make sure that if you are going to participate, you are being safe. You want to take water if you are going out for a hike and doing some observations, and we encourage you to wear a hat and wear sunscreen, maybe bring some salty snacks. If you are going out with kids, we want to make sure you supervise them. There's lots of prickly things like in that photo below. And just keep your eyes on the ground, but most importantly, respect nature and its organisms. I wanted to include that photo of the people watching that bear, and they are just too close. So even though you might find something cool to take a photo of, we do want you to still keep a distance and make sure you don't end up hurt. Snakes camouflage really well too. There's a photo down there. So keep your eyes open. It does make for a great observation, but we want you to ultimately stay safe also. So after May 3rd, the event goes into what we call Identification Week. And what that means is some of the photos you upload, you're not always going to know what the specimen might be or what it is exactly you observed. iNaturalist has a really great recognition feature that does make suggestions about what they think your organism is or what it is you uploaded, but sometimes it's not always that easy. So during the week of May 4th through the 9th, we will be working, when I say we, I say the organizers and probably people on the iNaturalist app that use it frequently will be on there, and they will add identification to any photos you uploaded that you might not have known what it was at the time. So the second photo is actually an example of that. Once you click on the info or the unknown, it'll bring up different species for you. But again, if you're not totally sure, you can add one if you want, but we'll also be on that week, May 4th through the 9th, double checking and adding species if we're able to help. If you're interested in learning more about how to identify plants and animals, we are holding 2 identification events. One is going to be virtual via Zoom on Thursday, May 6th in the evening. And there will also be an in-person event that we'll hold here at the Environmental Education Center on Saturday, May 8th. So if you are interested in that, you don't have to be an expert to join us. But certainly if you have an affinity for flora and fauna, you're welcome to come and join one of these events. So ultimately, all of these photos and observations that get uploaded during that week into the iNaturalist app will be tallied. And the event traditionally started as a competition, as I mentioned, but because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and because it is a worldwide event, every scenario is different in each city. So this year, the event organizers are going to announce collaborative results on May 10th. And we'll get to see how many species were actually observed during that week. But here in Phoenix, we still wanted to keep some of the competition alive. So we are actually going to be comparing results with Tucson and Albuquerque, New Mexico. In addition to that, EcoFlora, the Educating Children Outdoors, and the Chandler Community Services Department will be giving prizes to a top observer, which includes the most observations. So that's the most photos uploaded. And then the top observer for the most species that you upload. And then we'll also have a prize for the top identifier. So if you're able to help us identify things, we want to reward you for that as well. So that is all I have, guys. If anybody has any questions, you can unmute yourself, or I can check the chat in a second. Thanks, guys.
And if anyone has any questions for Jeny or Daniella, yeah, you could put it in the chat box, or you could even unmute yourself and ask, since we have a very small group tonight.
Hi, I'm Jean, and I'm just really interested personally in this project and hoping that me and myself and the kids can be involved at the end of the month. I do have a question for Jeny. So you talked about kind of the purpose for EcoFlora and the process of what you're doing. And my question is kind of like, what have you, so I know you've only been doing it for a certain amount of time, but you are kind of incorporating information into a larger database, right? So it's something that's looking at sort of things from a global perspective. And I follow a lot of nature programs. I just watched the latest documentary, the one that was on extinction. So some really important things that scientists are finding right now, sort of on a global scale in relation to the way biodiversity is being affected. So I'm curious about what you're seeing in EcoFlora as far as the effect of the increasing urbanization on biodiversity. Are you seeing a lot of adapting going on? Are you seeing disappearance? Are you seeing, like decline or disease, things like that?
Yeah, for sure. Great question. And like you said, this has been for a year now, and we're looking at least to have the program through September of 2022. So we'll have 3 years worth of data to kind of analyze at that point. And it's really sometimes hard for us to remember that science takes time. So, we have created those species lists, and we've given kind of a preliminary look at, like I said, with those lists, what has been recorded in Inaturalist that hasn't been seen on SciNet. So a lot of the records in SciNet are historic, and we can compare that to what we're seeing. And when I made those lists, there have been quite a few things. There's a pretty big discrepancy between the two. So what we're in the process of doing now is seeing if we can go out and ask our project members to find those things. And then we can collect and make records for. So either A, the things that haven't been seen in SciNet, or the things that we don't have records for. So I don't know the exact number of those, I can't recall, but it was in the hundreds for some of them. So we're looking at, yeah, definitely, depending on what we find, if we can collect those species, what that says about biodiversity. So the state we're kind of at now is, okay, can we find those things? And then once we know that, we can say, okay, yes, we've lost this many species, or we've gained some, or, it could be a wash. You could have invasives that are here now, or introduced species that are evening out with native species. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Is the Boyce Thompson Arboretum, are there folks from either the nonprofit arm of that, the membership or whatever, that are involved in the EcoFlora?
I would like that. They're kind of outside of the boundary of Metro Phoenix, and it was kind of a debate for us to include that section or not. But yeah, we would totally be willing to collaborate for Ecoquests, or do some kind of, special event, special Ecoquest with them. I think that would be great.
Yeah, I was just thinking like the membership. So I'm a member there, but I live here. And so like, would their members have interest in doing something locally because they're going and visiting the Arboretum to enjoy the same types of plants and nature,
Yeah, definitely. And that would give us more of the exurban data, right? More of the stuff that's out there closer to wild spaces. I think that would be really interesting as well.
I have a quick question. It's so for the Inaturalist app, are we able to download that and log in and sort of take a look at, even though we're not actually, the challenge isn't going on until April 30th. Are we able to sort of get in there and sign into where we need to be, or do we have to wait?
Yeah, definitely. You can log in now and you can actually join. Are you talking about for the City Nature Challenge part of it?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, you can actually join now, and we're making journal posts. So you'll get, depending on what you choose for your email settings, you can get notifications of the journal posts that we're making with updates up until the date and through the competition.
Very cool. Thank you.
Question for Daniella, and this is, she was talking about how kids can get involved, and of course they do quite a bit of programming around that with the EC. So in terms of thinking about this as a recorded program that people can see later, what do you have recommendations for the community and families in relation to, like, here's what we kind of suggest that kids go look for to be part of the process, but things that you have found are of more interest to kids, or things that if you encouraged, kids to go look for insects or whatever, or whatever it is, go to Veterans Oasis and look for the little rabbits running around, or roadrunners, then you can kind of collect a lot of data, maybe in relation to certain species or whatever, because kids are excited about it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think initially when we started, or when we signed up, we really wanted to get people out into the Chandler parks. Our particular park, Veterans Oasis Park that I work at, there's tons of wildlife. So, but not everybody can always get here. So that's why we do say that if you want to do something in your backyard, like the hula hoop is a really good example of using with kids because it's confined to one space. But certainly I feel like you could apply also, you could almost do like a little scavenger hunt with them and tell them they have to look for bugs, or plants and flowers, or specific color flowers. So there's definitely a lot of things that you could get creative with, and definitely something for us to think about if we decide to do the event again next year, and things are a little bit more normal. We can create more of a bio blitz that's specific to areas or parks within Chandler for families to participate in.
Yeah, I love the idea of like choosing like a color of something or whatever. I have 5-year-olds, and I just think like you could get them to be really excited about it and learn more by kind of channeling their, how they learn essentially, and what's most interesting to them. I have to put in a little plug for the library and our programming that we're doing with our grab and go activity kits. Of course, the Environmental Education Center is going to be celebrating Earth Day, I believe, on Saturday, right?
Correct.
And
yes.
So they have a big drive up event that's coming up where you can come and pick up information. And I think a couple little activities in there. And the library also has some grab and go activity kits that'll be available at each branch, as well as the EC, that will just have little things that will kind of encourage kids and families. So there's a nature journal. There's another kind of citizen scientist kit that's coming out. There's one that's creating bird feeders that you can just hang in your yard. And again, that's a great one for kids to just put those bird feeders out and see who comes, who's coming, and who's fighting with each other for those seeds. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities, to think about how to get the kids more engaged in it, because they're our future.
Well, thank you so much, both Jeny and Daniella, for all of the great information. And so if no one else has any questions, we'll probably conclude this evening's presentation. Make sure you visit our website, chandlerlibrary.org, and sign up for the next 3 Science Matters talks in the series. They're going to be fantastic. And yeah, so I want to thank everyone for being here, and hope you have a good night.